Hi, everyone. Welcome to Mind of Minister podcast, recorded here at the Seattle Betsuing Buddhist Temple, where we discuss questions or topics submitted by our listeners. My name is Jason Yokoyama, and I'm here with the star of our show, Reverend Katsu.
Hi.
So today is a very special episode of Mind of Minister because we are happy to welcome Reverend Dr. Takashi Miyaji to the podcast.
Hey.
So, fun fact, Reverend Miyaji was actually one of the original ministers for Mind of Ministers, plural, the podcast YouTube show that this podcast is based off of.
Yeah, that is the most popular one. The first one is the most popular one. Lots of people watching. Yeah.
Are you more popular than us?
More popular than us.
Oh, okay.
No.
Okay, so help us become more popular. But Miyaji Sensei, would you like to introduce yourself to everyone?
Sure. Hey everyone, my name is Reverend Takashi Miyaji, and I was serving at the Tacoma Buddhist Temple for a short while in 2018 to 2020, and during my time at Tacoma Buddhist Temple, I had a great time working with the Sangha there. It's a great, the Pacific Northwest is a great area. People here are very nice, very down to earth, right? It's awesome to be here. And so every time I come back, it's always a pleasure to come back and say hi to familiar old faces.
Nice. So Miyaji Sensei is currently the Dean of the Insitute of Buddhist Studies in Berkeley, California, as well as a resident minister of the Southern Alameda County Buddhist Temple. So Sensei, what is IBS?
IBS is the Institute of Buddhist Studies, not irritable bowel syndrome, but it's the Institute of Buddhist Studies that actually this year, or 2024, celebrated its 75th anniversary. So it's been around for quite a while, and it started out as a seminary school for Jodo Shinshu ministers to be able to create Jodo Shinshu ministers who are American-born, and to have kind of this an academic institution that will be able to teach the basics of this teaching to be able to foster the next generation of ministers. And so that's continued on till this day, but it's also expanded out to teach about Buddhism in general, and has classes outside of Shinshu as well, covering an array of topics. And through the faculty, which is focused on other areas of Buddhism, we've been able to kind of expand the breadth of the classes that we offer. And, it's been a real kind of excitement to see IBS grow to what it is today, and to see the opportunities that lie before us. One of the things that I could think of off the top of my head is, Buddhist chaplaincy, and trying to create new venues, new avenues in which to discuss and expose Buddhism to the outside world, right? And to America, to a country that has largely been unfamiliar with the Buddhist tradition. So that's been a real excitement.
So it's a graduate school.
Yes, yeah. It's a graduate school offering graduate degrees, master's degrees, and also we have what's called certificate programs, a few different ones, which allow you the opportunity to study Jodo Shinshu Buddhism, or Zen Buddhism, or Buddhist chaplaincy, and those are called certificates, which kind of people can take with them to their next career path.
Yeah, and so anyone can apply. You don't have to be someone wanting to become a Jodo Shinshu minister to apply to IBS and get a master's. It's open to everyone.
That's correct. Yeah, anybody who, well, ideally, to be in the degree programs, you have to have graduated from an undergraduate school. You do have to have a BA in something, and then apply for the degree programs. But the certificate programs is open to anybody. Yeah, and not people like to take those.
Yeah. So for those of our listeners that may be interested more about IBS, that want to learn about the degrees, the certificate program that Miyaji Sensei just mentioned, you can visit their website at www.shin-ibs.edu.
Great.
Thank you for that intro to IBS. I don't think we've actually ever talked about IBS on the podcast before.
Maybe not.
Because Sensei, you didn't go to IBS, did
No,
you?
I didn't.
Oh yeah, I didn't go to IBS either. So only Miyaji Sensei, who's now the dean.
And the IBS is located in the Jodo Shinshu Center, which is in Berkeley, California. In the Jodo Shinshu Center, the BCA headquarters is there, quote unquote, temporarily, but it's indefinite, probably right now, that it's located at Berkeley's Jodo Shinshu Center. but then also the Jodo Shinshu International Office, which is headed by Reverend Kuwahara, who's been trying to make inroads with expanding Jodo Shinshu Buddhism out to the English-speaking world, to outside of the U.S. So in England or wherever people are interested in learning about Jodo Shinshu in English. And he's initiated a number of different programs. For example, one of them is the quarterly journal that he's put out. He's trying to head up programs where they translate certain books. Since he was a part of the major project of translating the ordination, I'm sorry, not the ordination, the rituals within the Jodo Shinshu tradition. What is the English title? I forget the name.
Standard traditions and Jodo Shinshu traditions. What? Traditions and standard of Jodo Shinshu Hunganji-ha. The Hoshiki-han in Japanese. So that took almost 10 years to translate.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's a monumental task, but at the same time, I think it's really essential and needed in terms of getting our tradition down right and providing it for people who are interested.
Nice. Maybe one day I'll read it.
Yeah.
10 years is a long time. That's a lot of work.
Right.
But I guess Miyaji Sensei, so you're I think one of the few ministers that have both been ordained minister but also have a doctorate. And the sheet that I was given says that your specialty is in the area of Japanese Buddhism and religion, translation of Buddhist scripture, and then Jodo Shinshu doctrine and ethics. Correct. Yeah. So have you been like a part of more translation efforts with Kuwahara Sensei, or are you so busy with like IBS that it's maybe?
Yeah, currently I'm not working on anything in terms of translation that will be published, but in terms of for my class that I teach or for an upcoming seminar or upcoming talk that I have to do, yeah, absolutely. Translating is just, it's part of the job, and so it's really a rewarding experience, because I find that there's a lot of things that are lost in translation, and personally I see it as one of my life's mission, and kind of this constant struggle is to be able to explain what gets lost in translation in an easy way that people can understand, and because there's a lot that gets lost, and so when you explain those cultural differences, I think there's a lot more communication that happens between both sides, and there's a lot more understanding that happens. If you explain it correctly, I think a lot of things can get, a lot of misunderstandings can get stamped out, or preemptively not start. And I think that's important to do. There's a lot of in between the lines that need to be explained out loud. And I think that's what I see as myself as being, one of the jobs for me to do.
And we're talking about like translation from Japanese to English.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. And also English back to Japanese as well. I think there's certain things that get lost there too. And so I'm trying to think, off the top of my head, what are certain things that I can talk about in terms of like the cultural differences or things that get lost in translation. I can't think of anything off the top of my head now, but just, hypothetically speaking, the term faith, shinjin, how do we understand that as faith, or are there, certain key differences between the two? I think that's, something that's really important to kind of draw out the differences, because, I'm an American. I grew up in LA, and, I had my understandings of faith. I was never raised in a Christian setting or, but, I went to In-N-Out, and so I saw those what's written on the cups of In-N-Out, right? John 3:16 or whatever, So you're forced to know certain biblical passages or Christian notions, right? And so how do we draw those differences? I think is something that's really important for us to do. Yeah,
interesting. This is a topic we haven't really talked about too much at Mind of Minister. We of course talked about Shinjin, but like more of like the meaning. I don't think we have said, we don't say faith on our podcast, but like knowing that like traditionally back when it was first translated from Japanese to English, that kind of word was used, especially in that, like that little black book, that one that was used for like scouting awards, like it was like Buddhism for like young adults, that has a whole chapter on like Shinjin, and it just says faith, which is a difficult concept for people to understand. I think, especially like in the Western world, because faith is so rooted in sort of Western religions, like belief in God and stuff like that, which is not present in Buddhism at all.
But that even in Japanese, if we say Shinjen, typical Japanese people, probably I don't think those Japanese people also don't understand Jodo Shinshu way. So more like a kind of general meaning, I believe in something. So that's a kind of Shinjin in particular. So I think either, even in Japanese, that doesn't matter English or Japanese, we have to explain what Shinjin is.
Interesting. We got a little off topic from what the podcast was, just because Miyaji Sensei's here and I'm very interested in what he's doing, so I apologize. But we do have a question today submitted by one of our viewers, our listeners, and this question says, I am a millennial who grew up going to Honganji service, Dharma school, etc., but now live in an area pretty far away from a temple. I still go to Obon, Hanamatsuri service, etc. if I happen to be in an area with a temple, but I realize that I do not have a good way to incorporate Jodo Shinshu style teachings that I remember as a kid into my life now. I have used the Calm or Headspace apps in meditation for anxiety because they touch on concepts like impermanence, mindfulness, but they are missing a bit of the stories and lessons that I remember liking as a kid. Do you have any recommendations for materials and way to incorporate practice in your daily life?
Yeah. Do you want to go? Yeah. There's a few things I want to say in terms of how to answer this question. Well, just to kind of go off the top of the list, I think what I do in my own personal kind of every day is when I wake up in the morning, there's I do a short omairi, right? And that's a short. What I do is I do the jusei, and then so I have when my family is there, my son and my wife. My son is 8 years old, so his attention span is like a minute. No, I'm just kidding. It's a little bit more than that, but so it's basically it's just a jusei, right? Or basically just the jusei, and he can actually recite that off the top of his head. So and just doing that consistently every day, I think is one of the practices that I do. And I say practice kind of intentionally, not to say that I'm thinking to myself when I chant jusei that I'm going to the Pure Land or that this is something that that I'm using for my own benefit or for to accrue merit or anything like that. But I'm saying practice in the sense that it's a daily routine. It's already ingrained within my daily routine, and it's come to a point where it's like I don't feel right unless I do chanting in the morning. And when I do that, and then I do the Jodo Shinshu Seikatsu Shinjo, which is the Jodo Shinshu Creed, and then I have some of the vows that are memorized, and so I repeat that. But then it could be very as simple as a 2-3 minute thing, right? And then light the candle and light the incense and that kind of thing. But coming before the Obutsudan, the home altar, putting our hands together and saying Namanda Gasho every morning, just that alone I think is big, because what it's doing is that you are acknowledging that the start of your day is with your awareness that you are a part of this greater reality that is beyond who you are, right? And that you are embraced in this one truth. And then you're going to start your day from there. And I think that's kind of important to remember. So that's kind of one of the ways that I would approach. I think, Sensei, you had like a similar thought as we were talking about.
Yeah, I agree with Miyaji Sensei. Then maybe there be different point of view. Mm-hmm. So sometimes I kind of, the listening is important aspect of Jodo Shinshu. So we listen to the teaching, we listen to ministers' Dhamma message, or taking a lecture, or even reading the books too. Then sometimes, some short phrase was kind of Buddhist poem struck me. Then I kind of repeat reciting those poems. So to me, like my father, who was also the Buddhist minister, he gave a Dhamma message maybe long time ago when I was a child. Then somehow, once Dhamma school service, he introduced one Buddhist poem. Then 20 years, 30 years later, that came up in my mind somehow. Then that's really I appreciate, when I see in my daily life, see things, using that poem teaching, using that teaching to see whatever happening in my daily life. So then sometimes I'm keep reciting that poem every time. Then one example is, one Buddhist teaching is we see things just as they are. That's a simple teaching. Then at the same time, my father's poem was, in Japanese, it says, 夏は暑かと、冬は寒かと、それでよかと、もう that's it. Summer is hot. Winter is cold. That's as it is. So, but we expect summer is nice and comfortably cool. That when winter is so cold, we complain to the weather. So that's me. But that simple poem, 夏は暑かと summer is hot, winter is cold, just as they are. It is good, just as it is. So that simple poem is kind of reflecting, kind of mirror to show me what I'm thinking. So that's maybe one way to incorporate the Jodo Shinshu teaching in my daily life.
Wow, it's great.
So Miyaji-sensei, you're saying that your practice is you just have like a small short service every morning in front of your obutsudan or home altar. And then sensei, you're more about, I guess, thinking about like a core teaching or something that's resonated with you, and then using that sort of as a guidance or like a remembrance of like Jodo Shinshu teachings in daily life. Because I think it's very interesting that like, right, when you give like a Dharma talk, a sermon at Sunday service, or at least how you usually taught, it's always about like teaching a lesson, but like it's making a connection with like the people that are listening. And like, I think a topic that's always talked about is like, you can find Buddhism like in anything. Like you can find Buddhism in daily life because it exists all around us. My bad. It exists all around us. And so I guess for me, I would think how I would answer this question is, I guess, just thinking about trying to find Buddhism in your everyday life. And sort of, I think maybe through that, this person can then begin to reconnect with some of the teachings that they remember liking as a child, right? So it could be something as simple as before you eat, you say like, itadakimasu, like I humbly receive, like recognizing everything that went into your meal, all the, causes and conditions of why we can like have this meal is a good start. I think something that a lot of people commonly do is like, if you kill a bug, after you kill the bug, you say nembutsu, you say namo midabutsu, in recognition that like, yes, you just took a life. Small things like that, I think, is what maybe the average person will do. Unfortunately, I don't have like a poem like Sensei has that I just think like, oh, this is always
your favorite poem, those Shinran Shonins. 9 years old Shinran Shonin recite.
I do have my favorite poem. My favorite poem is by our founder Shinran Shonin that he recited when he was 9 years old. 9 years old. This boy recited this poem when he was about to be ordained, which is really funny because tomorrow at our temple we're celebrating Honko, one of our most important services, the memorial of our founder Shinran Shonin, and this story is always told every year. Maybe that's why it's my favorite. Sensei made me say it on the spot, a bad rough translation, but I will tell the whole story, even though I have two full ministers here and one with a PhD. So Shinran... yeah, exactly. Oh no, I'm being put on the spot. But Shinran Shonin lost his parents at a young age, and his uncle brought him to the monastery, temple, and he was going to become like a priest. But it was like late at night, and the head abbot, that's the right, like the head priest of the temple said, oh, let's just, it's late. Let's not do this right now. We're going to wait till tomorrow. And then Shinran very like famously said this poem in Japanese. He like looked out. This is how I picture it. He like looked outside. It was like a spring day and he saw like the cherry blossoms outside of like the temple in like the courtyard. And he said, cherry blossoms that are meant to last through the night may well be blown away by like a sudden storm. indicating that he had the understanding that like we have to do this now. Impermanence is a very important thing. You know, what it was like ancient Japan. Anything could happen at night, you know. But like he recognized that like he wanted to do this and this was very important. And the head abbot, hearing this poem from Shinran, said, okay, we're doing it now. And then Shinran was ordained that night. And so yes, that's my favorite poem about impermanence. I think if I think about personally all of the Buddhist lessons I've learned over the years, impermanence is probably the one that I think about the most. I think conceptually it's the easiest one to both identify with as well as like help teach to other people. Because I mean, we talked about Shinjin, but Shinjin is a very difficult concept to teach. Shinjin, other power, we talked about that our last like podcast episode. These are very difficult things. But impermanence, interconnectedness, these are the things that I think are very approachable to people. And so that was a very long aside story, but like I guess my response to this question is think about those things in life, those Buddhist lessons that you remember as a child, and then start looking for ways that you can apply that teaching to your life in everyday occurrences. Just because you don't live near a temple, maybe you don't have a home obutsudan to have a service, maybe you don't have a favorite poem from your minister father, you can still kind of fall back on the basics, I think. And I think that this is a good lesson for everyone. It's like, you know, the basics are good, and the basics of Buddhism are sound. They've been the sound and the same for 2,500 years. Not just Jodo Shinshu, but like in general. So,
I mean, today I was talking to Terada-san, right? Terada-san, who's like a kind of a devout, you know, Shishu follower, and she was, you know, talking about judo to me. Actually, not even talking about Buddhism. She was just telling me about judo and how she's been doing it all these years, and she was just saying, you know, it's all about. Well, long story short, she was saying it's all about the basics, kihon. And she kept saying kihon. And it's true. I mean, like it's all about the basics. Like if you keep doing that, then you start to eventually understand how that is the root of everything, of how you do all things. And so even if you start ad-libbing, if you start doing things on the fly, you start doing things complicated, as long as you have the kihon, the basics down, you're able to kind of adjust to the new situation, to the new moment. And so what we're talking about, Sensei is talking about, you know, this poem that he's listening to the Dharma talks, getting the kihon, right, of it down. And then doing the morning services that I'm talking about, doing the kihon, right, is all part of it. Itadakimasu, I think, is all part of the kihon that we're all being taught, and that we need to kind of emphasize this basics. It seems so simple that sometimes we want, you know, I know we want something more complicated, right? We want to be able to sound like we're sophisticated. We want to be able to portray to other people that we've got it down, we've got life figured out. But that all of that is a facade, you know. Like a lot of these like YouTube things that I watch, you know, people try to come in with that, you know, this I've got life figured out, and you just got to follow these things, right? And it's like, you know, I you know, take what you will out of those things, but for me, it sounds, you know, like a lot of embellishment, a lot of exaggeration, when really what it should be down to is the basics of it, right? And that's, I think, so Jodo Shinshu is very simple, and it seems like it's actually so simple that we kind of make fun of it, or people outside of the tradition make fun of Jodo Shinshu, and you know, say that that's not real Buddhism. The ministers grow their hair out, they eat meat, right? They marry, and they don't live, you know, Buddhist-like at all. But the thing about it is, the best conversations that we have about life happen while we're drinking, is it not? Right? It's happening when we're hanging out with our friends, right? And talking and having these simple conversations, that these real conversations when life is speaking to us, like through impermanence. That's why we're able to connect with these teachings very well, I think. And so it is simple, right? And it's about, you know, being simple about these things, because I think life is too complicated. Anyway, that was a long-winded explanation of trying to say how we should stick to the fundamentals, stick to the basics, I think is very important. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, so hopefully for this person that asked this question, we've answered your question. If stick to the basics, maybe if you do not have a home obutsudan, maybe seek out getting one. Visit the BCA bookstore or go to Japan. Yeah. You never know. And then maybe if you have access to maybe some literature, some passages, you could do a little bit more of reading, kind of find something maybe that resonates with you, and then hopefully you can incorporate some more Jodo Shinshu practices into your life if that is what your wish is.
Yeah, sorry. And is it okay to continue on this conversation?
Sure, why not?
Yeah, because there's other things that came to mind too. As I was thinking about this. I think also, like as Sensei mentioned, if you try to see how Jodo Shinshu or the teachings of Jodo Shinshu play out in our everyday lives, I think is really important. I think when we look at, like when we watch movies, right? I think we should try to interpret what would be the Jodo Shinshu take on this movie. What would be the Jodo Shinshu approach or interpretation of this movie, like Inside Out? How would Jodo Shinshu approach that, right? Or even a movie about, I love movies where the line between good and evil gets blurred, right? Or the line of what we think people should fit into certain categories gets blurred. I like movies that do that, right? So like the case in point, Star Wars, right? With Darth Vader, being portrayed as this kind of evil person, but actually, when we think about it, he was deprived of his mother's love at an early age, right? He loses kind of the love of his life, right? And then the whole time, throughout the whole movie, what he's trying to do is just be loved, right? And because he isn't able to do that, then it goes sour. But then and so my wife was pointing out to me, she said, that whole mask thing is him masking his emotions, right, of his being scarred, and that's what he was trying to hide, or that's what he can see that he was trying to conceal after becoming Darth Vader, and the rest is history. So I think, in that sense, that would be the Jodo Shinshu kind of maybe one of many probably interpretations that we can do of that movie. And I think, there's just other movies, like I like the movie The Others with Nicole Kidman. This is an old movie, but spoiler alert, it turns out that they were all dead, and but the movie portrays it as if they were alive, right? And so I like movies that do that kind of play with that toy with that notion of life and death, of good and evil. I think is really important. That movie Sicario, right? That's about the drug cartels, right? What is the Jodo Shinshu take on the drug cartels, right? It's saying that the government does things that are just as dirty as the cartels themselves. So who are the real good guys and bad guys here? Or, is it so clear cut that everything is black and white? And the answer to that is no. And that is the Jodo Shinshu approach. That would be a Jodo Shinshu interpretation to that movie and that issue that is still kind of predominant in this world that we live in right now. So I think that's another way that we can kind of, approach how to look at this world through Jodo Shinshu lens, right?
I've never, I guess I watch a movie for content. I've never really, I think, dived down into it and been like, what is like the Jodo Shinshu view of this?
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. I don't even know the last movie that I've watched.
You know that movie, 28 Days Later?
Oh yeah, I love that movie.
Yeah, I love that movie too. There's this one scene at the end of that movie where the general, right? He's like, he says at the dinner, they're having a dinner, and then he says, what I've been seeing, what's been happening since the zombie apocalypse happened is people eating people, people taking advantage, people devouring other people and hurting each other. You know what I saw before the whole zombie eclipse happened? People doing the exact same thing. So nothing's really changed. And so when he said that, I was like, that's really interesting. That is exactly what we're doing. We're acting like zombies right now and hurting other people, taking advantage of other people without even giving this a second thought. And so, that would be kind of a Jodo Shinshu approach to thinking about that. Like, are we always as good as we make ourselves out to be, right? Why do we always put ourselves on this pedestal and look at other people and say, those are the bad guys, right? Scarface, that's another movie. He goes into the movie. There's a dinner scene, and they all blow up, and then he creates a scene in the restaurant, and so everybody, and it's a very pish posh restaurant, right? And everybody's looking at him like, that's how dare he do something bad, right? He's the bad guy, and then so Scarface says, you guys, that's what you guys want to do is point the finger at the bad guy. And he says, so say goodnight to the bad guy. And then he walks off, right? But he's saying like, he's like, what are you trying to say? Just because you point me as the bad guy, that means you guys are good? No, right? And that's the point that he's trying to make. And I think that that's a very kind of another kind of Shinshu-esque approach to it is to question, are things really as black and white as they are? And the answer is never. It never is. It's always gray. And to look at the subtleties and the complexities in the situations, I think, is a very Jodo Shinshu approach.
Yeah, what is it? Who was it that gave like the Dharma talk or the whole that I remember going to, and someone was like, when you point a finger at someone else, you're still pointing 3 fingers back at yourself. It was someone. I don't remember who it was, but like that's like the exact same, the same thing.
Yeah, that's great.
I definitely think I'm gonna start thinking about this when I watch movies.
Right. And then when I know, because like sometimes I get stuck on, I don't know if that would be the Jodo Shinshu take on that. Then it would be good to ask other people, like what did you think about that movie from a Jodo Shinshu perspective? Or the sensei, ask Kusunagi sensei, have you seen that movie? What do you think about that movie, right? And I think asking different people through this like through this issue of like movies or books, these kinds of things, I think would be really helpful in terms of how to look at Jodo Shinshu in our everyday lives. Yeah.
Kato-sensei, you have anything you would like to add, or?
Well, there are, the lessons in our daily life. So we don't realize, if once we are using our, like Miyaji say, using the Jodo Shinshu lens to see our daily life, the world, maybe so many guidance or lessons we can learn from in our daily life. Just maybe because of our blind passion, we cannot see those lessons. So that's maybe even movie, a TV show, or even the daily conversations. I think there's so many lessons in our daily life. So because we are living in the Buddha Dharma, in the Dharma. So that's if we always think about that way, gradually, we may be able to think more lessons we can learn in our daily life. By the way, did we take any lessons from the Shogun? Jodo Shinshu?
We didn't even talk about that. The whole time we just talked about, wow, you met them? Yeah. What was it like as an on-set? We didn't even talk about Buddhism.
We never talk about Jodo Shinshu lessons from the Shogun.
I did ask Aoki-sensei, though, like, how was being like an actor and an advisor influence your like life as a minister? He did speak about that, but we didn't actually talk about, does this show have like any Jodo Shinshu lessons in it besides the fact that they chant Amida Kyo?
We have to watch again.
We'll invite Aoki-sensei to come too, and we can all watch together. Well, watch party. What a great idea.
That I mentioned the movie Inside Out, but the producers of that movie, or the writers, consulted Kin Sensei, who was a faculty member at IBS.
Really?
Yeah, Buddhist concepts of the Dharma and Buddha Dharma and that kind of thing. Yeah.
Look, we have all like the inside knowledge on the podcast. But I do think that that's probably all the time we have today for this episode. Thank you very much to Reverend Katsu, our producer Alex for running our camera and sound as always, and of course Miyaji Sensei for being a guest on our show here today. And also thanks to all of our listeners and those of you who have submitted questions. As always, if you have a question for Sensei, please don't hesitate to submit it in. The links can be found in the description below. And if you like what we hear, please tune into our next episode and check out our temple, Seattle Betsuing, online. Oh, and also, if you're interested in IBS, you can zoom back the video where I talk about the website. But yeah, Insitute of Buddhist Studies, not irritable bowel syndrome.
Yes.
But once again, I'm Jason.
I'm Reverend Katsu.
And Reverend Miyaji.
And thank you for tuning in.